One-Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse quotes, "One-Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse is a profound critique of advanced industrial society, focusing on how technological rationality and consumer culture have led to a form of societal control that suppresses individuality and critical thought. Marcuse argues that capitalism has integrated individuals into a system of false needs and material comforts, effectively pacifying opposition and creating a one-dimensional world where alternative ways of thinking and living are systematically eliminated. The book critiques how technological advancements, initially promising liberation, have instead reinforced domination by limiting freedom of thought and perpetuating a false sense of satisfaction, thus preventing any meaningful change or resistance." Quote 1. "A comfortable, smooth, reasonable, democratic unfreedom prevails in advanced industrial civilization, a token of technical progress. In advanced industrial societies, the concept of freedom has shifted towards a more controlled form of existence, where technological advancements offer comfort and rationality at the expense of individuality and true freedom. This unfreedom is presented as democratic and reasonable, yet it ultimately suppresses individuality under the guise of technical progress, creating an illusion of liberty within a highly regulated environment." Quote 2. "The rights and liberties which were such vital factors in the origins and earlier stages of industrial society yield to a higher stage of this society. They are losing their traditional rationale and content. As society evolves, the rights and liberties that once served as crucial tools for promoting freedom and critical thought are gradually losing their original purpose. In the context of a society increasingly capable of meeting individual needs, these liberties no longer carry the same transformative power, instead becoming institutionalized elements that have lost their critical and emancipatory function." Quote 3. "The individual would be liberated from the work world's imposing upon him alien needs and alien possibilities. The individual would be free to exert autonomy over a life that would be his own." Marcuse envisions a society where technological advances could potentially liberate individuals from imposed needs that do not align with their true desires. By redirecting technology towards fulfilling genuine human needs, individuals would no longer be bound by alienated labor, but would instead be free to shape their lives autonomously, based on their authentic aspirations and potentials. Quote 4. "By virtue of the way it has organized its technological base, contemporary industrial society tends to be totalitarian. Advanced industrial societies, through their reliance on technology, have developed a form of totalitarianism that extends beyond political control to encompass economic and intellectual aspects of life. This form of totalitarianism functions not necessarily through direct coercion, but through the subtle manipulation of needs and desires, ensuring that opposition to the established order remains ineffective and marginalized." Quote 5. "The brute fact that the machine's physical power surpasses that of the individual and of any particular group of individuals makes the machine the most effective political instrument in any society whose basic organization is that of the machine process. Machines and technological systems hold an immense amount of power, overshadowing the abilities of individuals or groups. In a society structured around technological processes, these machines become effective tools for political control, amplifying the reach of power beyond what could be achieved by traditional means alone, while also limiting individual autonomy and potential for resistance." Quote 6. "Contemporary industrial civilization demonstrates that it has reached the stage at which the free society can no longer be adequately defined in the traditional terms of economic, political, and intellectual liberties. The advancements in industrial society have rendered the traditional definitions of freedom outdated. Economic, political, and intellectual liberties are no longer sufficient to capture the concept of a truly free society. Instead, new ways of understanding and realizing freedom are necessary. ways that correspond to the capabilities and contradictions inherent in an advanced industrial civilization. Quote 7. We may distinguish both true and false needs. False are those which are superimposed upon the individual by particular social interests in his repression. The needs which perpetuate toil, aggressiveness, misery, and injustice. Marcuse makes a distinction between true and false needs, where false needs are artificially imposed upon individuals by societal forces that benefit from repression and control. These needs serve to maintain a system that enforces unnecessary labor, perpetuates aggression, and upholds social injustices, thereby keeping individuals from recognizing their true desires and potential for freedom. Quote 8. The distinguishing feature of advanced industrial society is its effective suffocation of those needs which demand liberation. Liberation also from that which is tolerable and rewarding and comfortable. Advanced industrial society is characterized by its ability to suppress the needs that drive individuals towards genuine liberation. By providing comfort, convenience, and material satisfaction, it obscures the desire for liberation from the structures that ultimately limit true autonomy and fulfillment, thus ensuring that the existing order remains intact and unquestioned. Quote 9. Under the rule of a repressive whole, liberty can be made into a powerful instrument of domination. In a society governed by repressive forces, the concept of liberty itself can be co-opted as a means of control. Superficial forms of freedom, such as consumer choice or political participation, serve to reinforce the dominance of the established system by creating an illusion of autonomy while maintaining underlying power structures that limit true emancipation. Quote 10. The people recognize themselves in their commodities. They find their soul in their automobile, hi-fi set, split-level home, kitchen equipment. Marcuse argues that individuals in advanced industrial societies have come to identify with their consumer goods, finding meaning and identity in material possessions. This relationship between people and their commodities reflects a deeper integration of consumerism into personal identity, where the satisfaction of artificially created needs replaces genuine self-realization and autonomy. Quote 11. Today, this private space has been invaded and whittled down by technological reality. Mass production and mass distribution claim the entire individual, and industrial psychology has long since ceased to be confined to the factory. In advanced industrial society, the private sphere that once allowed individuals to develop independent thoughts and maintain a degree of autonomy has been eroded by technological advancements. Mass production, mass distribution, and industrial psychology extend beyond the confines of the workplace, shaping individuals' behavior and thoughts even in their personal lives. As a result, the boundaries between the external societal forces and one's private mental space have dissolved, leading to a deeper integration of the individual into the demands of technological reality. Quote 12. The loss of this dimension in which the power of negative thinking, the critical power of reason, is at home, is the ideological counterpart to the very material process in which advanced industrial society silences and reconciles the opposition. The private dimension, where individuals can critically reflect and oppose the status quo, has diminished. This loss represents the ideological aspect of a broader material process in which advanced industrial society effectively neutralizes dissent and silences opposition. The progress and efficiency of the system lead individuals to accept their conditions without question, replacing critical reasoning with submission to the established reality, thereby stifling any potential for genuine resistance. Quote 13. The products indoctrinate and manipulate. They promote a false consciousness which is immune against its falsehood. And as these beneficial products become available to more individuals in more social classes, the indoctrination they carry ceases to be publicity. It becomes a way of life. Consumer products, produced and distributed by advanced industrial society, play a significant role in manipulating the consciousness of individuals. These products carry embedded ideologies that promote a false sense of satisfaction and happiness, which individuals readily accept without questioning their validity. As these goods become accessible to an increasing number of people across different social classes, the manipulation and indoctrination they carry transform from mere advertisement to an accepted way of life, effectively reinforcing the existing social order. Quote 14. Thus emerges a pattern of one-dimensional thought and behavior in which ideas, aspirations, and objectives that, by their content, transcend the established universe of discourse and action are either repelled or reduced to terms of this universe. The culture of advanced industrial society promotes a one-dimensional mode of thinking that discourages any ideas or aspirations that go beyond the established norms. Ideas that challenge the current system are either dismissed or absorbed into the existing framework in a diluted form, thus preventing any real transformative change. This one-dimensional thinking limits the ability to imagine or strive for alternative modes of existence that would transcend the prevailing social and ideological structures. Quote 15. One-dimensional thought is systematically promoted by the makers of politics and their purveyors of mass information. Their universe of discourse is populated by self-validating hypotheses which, incessantly and monopolistically repeated, become hypnotic definitions or dictations. Political authorities and mass media deliberately cultivate a one-dimensional way of thinking by promoting narratives that validate themselves through repetition. These narratives, repeated continuously and without challenge, become ingrained as undeniable truths in society. This process limits the scope of public discourse and ensures that only ideas which conform to the status quo are accepted, thereby reinforcing the dominant power structures and suppressing alternative viewpoints. Quote 16. Advanced industrial society is approaching the stage where continued progress would demand the radical subversion of the prevailing direction and organization of progress. Marcuse suggests that the current trajectory of technological and industrial development is reaching a point where genuine progress would require a fundamental shift in its direction and organization. Instead of serving as tools for domination and exploitation, technological advancements should be reoriented to promote human liberation and fulfillment. This radical change would involve transforming the very structure of production and social organization, aiming for a society where technology serves human needs rather than perpetuating control and inequality. Quote 17. The society of total mobilization, which takes shape in the most advanced areas of industrial civilization, combines in productive union the features of the welfare state and the warfare state. Advanced industrial societies are characterized by a state of total mobilization, where the structures of the welfare state and warfare state merge. These societies focus on increasing productivity while simultaneously preparing for military threats, creating a complex union that serves both the interests of big corporations and state defense. Government plays an active role in supporting and regulating this system, which ultimately integrates economic, political, and social life into a unified whole aimed at sustaining and expanding control. Quote 18. In the political sphere, this trend manifests itself in a marked unification or convergence of opposites. The political landscape in advanced industrial societies is increasingly marked by a convergence of opposing forces, such as political parties, which once represented distinct interests. Under the perceived threat of international communism, bipartisanship emerges, and domestic policy differences diminish. This unification blurs traditional boundaries between political ideologies, leading to a situation where even once oppositional forces become aligned with the interests of maintaining the existing social and economic system, thereby limiting the potential for genuine social change. Quote 19. Mobilized against this threat, capitalist society shows an internal union and cohesion unknown at previous stages of industrial civilization. Capitalist society has developed a previously unseen level of internal unity and cohesion in response to the perceived threat of international communism. This mobilization acts as a powerful stimulus for production and employment, helping to maintain a high standard of living and suppressing social conflicts. By fostering a sense of common purpose and external threat, capitalist societies effectively mitigate class struggles and maintain stability, transforming internal antagonisms into manageable differences within the system. Quote 20. The classical Marxian theory envisages the transition from capitalism to socialism as a political revolution. The proletariat destroys the political apparatus of capitalism but retains the technological apparatus, subjecting it to socialization. Classical Marxism envisions a revolutionary transition from capitalism to socialism, wherein the working class dismantles the political structures of capitalism while preserving and repurposing its technological achievements. This continuity of technological rationality under socialism is expected to lead to its true emancipation, freed from the irrational constraints imposed by capitalist production. However, Marcuse questions whether the current integration of technology and control in advanced industrial societies still allows for this envisioned transition, as technological control has deeply infiltrated every aspect of life. Quote 21. Now, it is precisely this new consciousness, this space within, the space for the transcending historical practice, which is being barred by a society in which subjects as well as objects constitute instrumentalities in a whole, that has its raison d'être in the accomplishments of its overpowering productivity. The possibility of developing a consciousness that transcends the existing social order is being systematically closed off by advanced industrial society. Both individuals and objects are treated as instruments within a system whose purpose lies in its relentless productivity. This society offers comfort and material satisfaction, but denies the space for critical reflection and transformative action, thus preventing any meaningful challenge to the established system. The result is a form of control that effectively neutralizes efforts towards true social and individual liberation. Quote 22. The proletarian of the previous stages of capitalism was indeed the beast of burden, by the labor of his body procuring the necessities and luxuries of life while living in filth and poverty. Thus, he was the living denial of his society. In earlier stages of capitalism, the proletariat embodied the denial of capitalist society through their harsh living and working conditions. Exploited and impoverished, their very existence highlighted the contradictions and injustices of the capitalist system. However, in advanced industrial society, mechanization and improved standards of living have changed the nature of this opposition, as workers are now integrated into the system in ways that mitigate their resistance and diminish their potential as a revolutionary force. Quote 23. The new technological work world thus enforces a weakening of the negative position of the working class. The latter no longer appears to be the living contradiction to the established society. In the advanced technological society, the working class loses its role as a force that fundamentally opposes the existing social order. The integration of technology into the workplace diminishes the distinctiveness of the working class as a symbol of resistance. With increased mechanization and bureaucratic management, traditional antagonisms are obscured by rational administration. As a result, the working class is absorbed into the system it once challenged, thereby weakening its oppositional power and diminishing the potential for social transformation. Quote 24. With technical progress as its instrument, unfreedom, in the sense of man's subjection to his productive apparatus, is perpetuated and intensified in the form of many liberties and comforts. Technical advancements, while bringing numerous liberties and comforts, also perpetuate a form of unfreedom by keeping individuals subjected to the productive apparatus. The efficiency and rationality of technological systems create a structure where individuals may feel comfortable and free, but are, in reality, deeply controlled by the machinery of production. The comforts provided by technological progress obscure the underlying lack of true freedom, as people become increasingly dependent on and shaped by the productive systems that determine their lives. Quote 25. The slaves of developed industrial civilization are sublimated slaves, but they are slaves. For slavery is déterminée pas par l'obéissance, ni par la rudesse des labeurs, mais par le statut d'instrument et la réduction de l'homme à l'état de choses. Even in developed industrial civilization, individuals remain in a state of slavery, though it has been sublimated through technological progress. This form of slavery is not defined by physical hardships or overt obedience, but by the reduction of humans to mere instruments, objects to be used within the productive apparatus. People may have material comforts and an appearance of freedom, but they remain subject to the dictates of a system that treats them as tools rather than autonomous beings. This subtle form of domination persists despite advancements in living conditions. Quote 26. A vicious circle seems indeed the proper image of a society which is self-expanding and self-perpetuating in its own pre-established direction, driven by the growing needs which it generates and at the same time contains. Advanced industrial society operates within a self-sustaining cycle, expanding and perpetuating itself along a predetermined path. This cycle is driven by the needs generated by the system itself, which are simultaneously satisfied and reinforced by it. The productive apparatus creates needs, then fulfills them, ensuring that the society continues along its established trajectory without significant deviation. This vicious circle prevents meaningful change and maintains the status quo, as the system's internal logic makes it difficult for alternative directions or genuine transformations to emerge. Quote 27. Automation indeed appears to be the great catalyst of advanced industrial society. It is an explosive or non-explosive catalyst in the material base of qualitative change, the technical instrument of the turn from quantity to quality. Marcuse suggests that automation has the potential to serve as a catalyst for significant social change in advanced industrial society. By fundamentally altering the nature of labor, automation could enable a shift from focusing on quantitative production to a qualitative transformation of life. This change would allow individuals to move beyond the constraints of labor-based existence, opening up possibilities for genuine human fulfillment and freedom. Automation, if directed properly, could break the cycle of domination and lead to a new form of civilization that prioritizes human development over mere productivity. Quote 28. Complete automation in the realm of necessity would open the dimension of free time as the one in which man's private and societal existence would constitute itself. If automation were to fully take over the realm of necessity, producing the material goods needed for survival, it would free individuals from the burdens of labor. This newfound free time could be used to develop one's private and societal existence, leading to a more fulfilling and autonomous life. By eliminating the need for people to spend their lives in routine and alienated labor, automation could create the conditions for a new civilization where individuals have the time and opportunity to pursue their true potential and shape their own destinies. Quote 29. The ruling strata are themselves separable from the productive process. That is, they are replaceable without exploding the basic institutions of society. Marcuse points out that the ruling class in Soviet society is not as deeply integrated into the productive process as the capitalist owners are in the West. This means that, theoretically, the ruling bureaucracy could be replaced without dismantling the fundamental structure of society. This possibility suggests that systemic change could occur through political means without necessarily disrupting the nationalized productive process. However, such change would still require a shift from quantitative reforms to a qualitative transformation of society, aimed at genuine self-determination for individuals rather than mere changes in administrative control. Quote 30. Quantitative change would still have to turn into qualitative change, into the disappearance of the state, the party, the plan, etc., as independent powers superimposed on the individuals. For true societal transformation, Marcuse argues that quantitative improvements, such as increasing productivity or living standards, are not enough. There must also be a qualitative shift that leads to the dissolution of institutions like the state and the party as external forces that dominate individuals. Only by eliminating these independent powers can a society achieve true freedom, where the productive forces serve the needs of the people rather than being tools of control. This qualitative change would require the establishment of conditions for self-determination, where individuals actively shape their lives rather than being subjected to administrative dictates. Quote 31. Domination is transfigured into administration. The capitalist bosses and owners are losing their identity as responsible agents. They are assuming the function of bureaucrats in a corporate machine. In advanced industrial societies, the nature of domination has shifted. The traditional capitalist owners no longer appear as individual agents responsible for exploitation. Instead, they have become bureaucrats within a vast corporate apparatus. This transformation blurs the lines between those who dominate and those who are dominated, as the mechanisms of control are increasingly hidden behind the rationality of administration. This shift makes it harder to identify and resist the sources of oppression, as power is diffused throughout the bureaucratic and technological structures that manage society. Quote 32. The executive and supervisory functions would no longer carry the privilege of ruling the life of others in some particular interest. Marcuse envisions a society where executive and supervisory roles exist, but do not have the power to control the lives of others for their own benefit. In such a society, these functions would be driven by genuine social needs and technical requirements rather than serving the interests of a privileged ruling class. This transformation would be a critical aspect of a revolutionary change towards a society where inequality is based solely on necessary differences in functions and not on power or privilege over others. Such a society would ensure that no individual or group has the power to dominate others. Quote 33. The need for the all-out utilization of technical progress and for survival by virtue of a superior standard of living may prove stronger than the resistance of the vested bureaucracies. Marcuse suggests that the pressures of international competition and the drive for a higher standard of living may eventually force communist bureaucracies to adopt changes that promote genuine liberation. The need to fully harness technological advancements to remain competitive with capitalist societies could outweigh the bureaucrats' interest in maintaining their privileged position. This dynamic could create the conditions for qualitative change, pushing towards a more democratic and self-determined society despite the resistance of entrenched power structures. Quote 34. Under such conditions, decline of freedom and opposition is not a matter of moral or intellectual deterioration or corruption. It is rather an objective societal process, insofar as the production and distribution of an increasing quantity of goods and services make compliance a rational technological attitude. In the welfare state, the decline of freedom and opposition is not simply due to moral or intellectual failures, but is an inevitable result of the societal structure. As the production and distribution of goods and services increase, compliance becomes a rational choice. People accept the system because it provides comfort and material satisfaction, making any opposition appear irrational. This technological and economic logic leads to a form of control, where individuals are subtly coerced into compliance by the very comforts and conveniences that the system offers. The suppression of freedom thus becomes a byproduct of the efficient functioning of the welfare state. Quote 35. The achievements and the failures of this society invalidate its higher culture. The celebration of the autonomous personality, of humanism, of tragic and romantic love, appears to be the ideal of a backward stage of the development. Marcuse argues that the progress and failures of advanced industrial society have rendered higher culture, marked by ideals such as humanism, personal autonomy, and romantic love, obsolete. These values now seem to belong to a previous stage of human development that has been surpassed by technological advancements. Modern society, with its emphasis on technological productivity and control, undermines the ideals that were once celebrated by higher culture. The values of the past are now seen as outdated and incompatible with the current state of society, which seeks to integrate all aspects of culture into its system of domination and control. Quote 36. Today's novel feature is the flattening out of the antagonism between culture and social reality through the obliteration of the oppositional, alien, and transcendent elements in the higher culture, by virtue of which it constituted another dimension of reality. In contemporary society, the distinction between higher culture and social reality has been diminished. The elements of culture that once provided a critical, oppositional perspective, offering an alternative vision of reality, have been absorbed into the established order. This flattening process eliminates the transcendent aspects of culture that once allowed individuals to see beyond the existing social structure. Culture is no longer a separate, critical realm that challenges the status quo. Instead, it has been incorporated into the system, losing its ability to present an alternative dimension of reality. Quote 37. The greatness of a free literature and art, the ideals of humanism, the sorrows and joys of the individual, the fulfillment of the personality are important items in the competitive struggle between East and West. The values traditionally associated with higher culture, such as the freedom of literature and art, humanism, and the fulfillment of individual potential, have become tools in the ideological struggle between capitalist and communist societies. These ideals are now used as propaganda in the competition between East and West, rather than serving as genuine expressions of human freedom and creativity. In this context, culture loses its authenticity, as it is instrumentalized for political purposes rather than being an autonomous realm that challenges and transcends the social order. Quote 38. Exchange value, not truth value, counts. On it centers the rationality of the status quo, and all alien rationality is bent to it. In advanced industrial society, cultural values are determined by their exchange value rather than their intrinsic truth. The logic of the market dominates all aspects of life, including culture, which means that the worth of a work of art or literature is measured by its ability to sell, rather than by its capacity to convey truth or provide a deeper understanding of the human condition. As a result, any alternative or alien rationality that challenges the status quo is co-opted and reshaped to fit within the existing system of market rationality, thereby losing its critical edge. Quote 39. The higher culture of the West, whose moral, aesthetic, and intellectual values industrial society still professes, was a pre-technological culture in a functional as well as chronological sense. Its validity was derived from the experience of a world which no longer exists and which cannot be recaptured because it is in a strict sense invalidated by technological society. Marcuse argues that the higher culture of the West, with its moral, aesthetic, and intellectual values, originated in a pre-technological era and cannot be fully integrated into the modern, technological world. The values of this culture were based on experiences and social structures that no longer exist in a society dominated by technological rationality. As technological progress transforms both society and human experience, the values of higher culture are rendered obsolete, as they cannot be reconciled with the logic and demands of technological society. Quote 40. The alien and alienating oeuvres of intellectual culture become familiar goods and services. Intellectual culture, which was once alien and alienating, challenging the established norms and providing a critical perspective, has now been transformed into something familiar and commodified. Works of art and literature that once provided a sense of estrangement from the existing social order are now mass-produced and consumed as everyday goods. This process strips these cultural works of their critical power, turning them into products that serve the existing system rather than challenging it. As a result, the potential for cultural alienation as a form of resistance is lost, and culture becomes another tool for maintaining social cohesion. Quote 41. The works of alienation are themselves incorporated into this society, and circulate as part and parcel of the equipment, which adorns and psychoanalyzes the prevailing state of affairs. Thus, they become commercials. They sell, comfort, or excite. Artistic works that once expressed alienation and challenged the status quo have now been absorbed into the very society they once critiqued. These works are commodified and used to adorn and justify the existing social order, becoming part of the cultural machinery that supports it. Instead of serving as instruments of critique and opposition, they are now used to entertain, comfort, or excite, serving commercial purposes rather than challenging the foundations of society. This transformation deprives these works of their original subversive intent, reducing them to mere cultural commodities. Quote 42. The efforts to recapture the great refusal in the language of literature suffer the fate of being absorbed by what they refute. Marcuse argues that attempts to revive the spirit of resistance, which he calls the great refusal, through literature and art ultimately fail because they are absorbed into the very system they aim to oppose. The avant-garde and beatnik movements, initially intended as acts of rebellion, are now part of mainstream culture, serving as entertainment for the masses. This assimilation robs these cultural expressions of their oppositional power, making them safe and acceptable within the established order. The system, fortified by technological progress and the alleviation of material misery, has effectively neutralized these cultural forms, turning them into harmless spectacles that no longer challenge the status quo. Quote 43. The conquest and unification of opposites, which finds its ideological glory in the transformation of higher into popular culture, takes place on a material ground of increased satisfaction. Marcuse highlights how advanced industrial society has managed to merge the realms of high and popular culture, creating a unified cultural sphere that lacks real opposition. This transformation is made possible by material abundance and an increase in general satisfaction, which diminishes the need for critical thought or the pursuit of alternatives. The values that once differentiated higher culture, such as intellectual depth and critical reflection, have been flattened and made accessible to everyone, but in a diluted form that no longer serves to question the prevailing social order. This convergence has thus eliminated the tension between different cultural forms, reducing everything to mere commodities that promote social cohesion. Quote 44. The pleasure principle absorbs the reality principle. Sexuality is liberated, or rather liberalized, in socially constructive forms. Marcuse describes a process in which the pleasure principle, the pursuit of immediate gratification, has absorbed the reality principle, which represents the demands of social necessity and discipline. In this context, sexuality is seemingly liberated, but only in forms that serve the needs of the existing social order. This liberation is carefully controlled, ensuring that the expression of desire remains socially acceptable and contributes to social cohesion. The apparent freedom in the realm of sexuality is thus not a true liberation, but rather a managed release that ultimately reinforces conformity and prevents genuine resistance to the established order. Quote 45. In this society, not all the time spent on and with mechanisms is labor time, i.e., unpleasurable, but necessary toil, and not all the energy saved by the machine is labor power. Mechanization has also saved libido, the energy of the life instincts, that is, has barred it from previous modes of realization. Marcuse argues that the mechanization of society has affected not only labor, but also human desire, or libido. Mechanization has freed people from certain kinds of labor, but it has also limited the outlets for their instinctual energies. The romanticized, pre-industrial forms of libidinal experience, where human connection with nature and creative activities offered a broad field for gratification, have largely disappeared. In their place, libido is confined to more immediate, localized, and less fulfilling forms of satisfaction. The result is a narrowing of human experience, where the erotic dimension of life is reduced to mere sexual release, losing the richness of broader, non-repressive forms of gratification. Quote 46. The organism is thus being preconditioned for the spontaneous acceptance of what is offered. Inasmuch as the greater liberty involves a contraction rather than extension and development of instinctual needs, it works for, rather than against the status quo of general repression. One might speak of institutionalized desublimation. In advanced industrial society, individuals are conditioned to accept what is provided to them without question. The apparent increase in freedoms is deceptive, as it often involves a narrowing rather than an expansion of human desires and instincts. This institutionalized desublimation allows for the release of certain desires, but in ways that support the existing social structure rather than challenge it. By granting limited freedoms that align with its interests, the system manages to maintain general repression while creating an illusion of liberation, ensuring compliance and reducing the impetus for genuine social change. Quote 47. This mobilization and administration of libido may account for much of the voluntary compliance, the absence of terror, the pre-established harmony between individual needs and socially required desires, goals, and aspirations. Marcuse suggests that the way libido is mobilized and controlled in advanced industrial society helps explain why people comply voluntarily with the system and why there is little overt coercion. By allowing for controlled expressions of desire and by aligning individual needs with socially imposed goals, the system creates a sense of satisfaction and harmony that reduces resistance. People feel that their desires are being fulfilled, even though those desires have been shaped to serve the needs of the system. This pre-established harmony between personal gratification and social requirements leads to a situation in which individuals accept their role within the existing order, feeling no need to challenge it. Quote 48. The happy consciousness, the belief that the real is rational and that the system delivers the goods, reflects the new conformism, which is a facet of technological rationality translated into social behavior. Marcuse describes the happy consciousness as a state of mind that represents a new form of conformity in advanced industrial society. It is based on the belief that the existing system is rational and capable of fulfilling people's needs, thereby justifying the current social order. This mindset, fostered by technological progress and material abundance, leads to widespread acceptance of the status quo without critical examination. The happy consciousness reflects how technological rationality shapes social behavior, promoting satisfaction with the present system while ignoring its underlying contradictions and repressive aspects. Quote 49. The elements of autonomy, discovery, demonstration, and critique recede before designation, assertion, and imitation. Marcuse argues that the qualities of genuine thought, autonomy, critical discovery, and demonstration, are increasingly replaced by mere designation, assertion, and imitation. In the language of advanced industrial society, discourse lacks the mediations that allow for deeper understanding and critical evaluation. Instead, language becomes a tool for asserting established truths and for promoting conformity, rather than serving as a means for exploring and questioning reality. This shift in language reflects a broader trend towards the suppression of independent thinking, as individuals are conditioned to accept predefined meanings without question. Quote 50. In this behavioral universe, words and concepts tend to coincide, or rather, the concept tends to be absorbed by the word. In the language of advanced industrial society, Marcuse observes that the distinction between words and concepts is disappearing. Words are no longer seen as symbols representing broader concepts that invite exploration and debate. Instead, the meaning of a concept is reduced to the immediate literal meaning of the word as it is used in everyday language. This absorption of concepts by words limits the scope of thought, as language becomes a closed system that leaves no room for questioning or critical reflection. Words become mere labels that reinforce the existing order, rather than tools for understanding and challenging it. Quote 51. At the nodal points of the universe of public discourse, self-validating, analytical propositions appear which function like magic ritual formulas. Marcuse describes how public discourse in advanced industrial society is characterized by self-validating propositions, statements that are repeated so often that they become accepted as truth without critical examination. These statements function like ritualistic formulas that shape the way people think and perceive reality. By constantly repeating certain phrases and ideas, the system creates a closed circle of meaning that excludes any alternative perspectives. This process reinforces the existing power structures by making their assumptions appear natural and unquestionable, effectively blocking the possibility of meaningful critique or dissent. Quote 52. The result is the familiar Orwellian language, peace is war, and war is peace, etc., which is by no means that of terroristic totalitarianism only. Marcuse argues that the manipulation of language in advanced industrial society resembles the Orwellian use of language depicted in George Orwell's dystopian novel, 1984. Terms like peace and freedom are redefined to fit the interests of those in power, creating a language that obscures rather than reveals the truth. This phenomenon is not limited to overtly repressive regimes, but is also present in societies that claim to be democratic. By controlling the meaning of words, those in power can manipulate public perception and maintain control without needing to resort to outright terror. The redefinition of language becomes a powerful tool for suppressing dissent and promoting conformity. Quote 53. In exhibiting its contradictions as the token of its truth, this universe of discourse closes itself against any other discourse which is not on its own terms. Marcuse points out that the language of advanced industrial society openly acknowledges its contradictions, but presents them as evidence of its legitimacy. By doing so, the system effectively neutralizes any challenge to its authority, as it preempts criticism by incorporating contradictory elements into its discourse. This self-contained language leaves no room for alternative viewpoints, as it frames all discussions within the terms set by the existing order. The result is a closed universe of discourse that excludes any genuine challenge or critique, maintaining the dominance of the established system by denying the possibility of any meaningful opposition. Quote 54. The thing identified with its function is more real than the thing distinguished from its function, and the linguistic expression of this identification creates a basic vocabulary and syntax which stand in the way of differentiation, separation, and distinction. Marcuse argues that in advanced industrial society, things are increasingly defined by their functions rather than by their inherent qualities. Language reflects this shift, as words are used in a way that equates objects with their immediate use or purpose. This functional identification creates a vocabulary that makes it difficult to see things in any other way, thus preventing deeper understanding or critical analysis. By reducing everything to its function, language eliminates the possibility of thinking about alternative uses or meanings, reinforcing a one-dimensional view of reality that supports the existing social and economic order. Quote 55. The unified, functional language is an irreconcilably anti-critical and anti-dialectical language. In it, operational and behavioral rationality absorbs the transcendent, negative oppositional elements of reason. Marcuse argues that the language used in advanced industrial society has become unified and functional, serving to maintain the status quo by eliminating critical and dialectical elements of thought. This language, driven by operational and behavioral rationality, lacks the ability to challenge or transcend existing conditions. It absorbs any potential for oppositional thinking, thereby preventing individuals from questioning or resisting the established order. As a result, language becomes an instrument for enforcing conformity rather than a tool for critical reflection and social change. Quote 56. The suppression of this dimension in the societal universe of operational rationality is a suppression of history. And this is not an academic, but a political affair. Marcuse points out that the suppression of historical consciousness in modern society is not merely an intellectual issue, but a deeply political one. By erasing the historical dimension, society loses the ability to recognize its own contradictions and potential for change. Historical concepts such as freedom, democracy, and socialism are redefined to fit the needs of those in power, stripping them of their original meaning and transformative potential. This suppression of history serves to maintain the existing social order by preventing people from drawing on past struggles and achievements as a basis for envisioning a different future. Quote 57. Remembrance is a mode of dissociation from the given facts, a mode of mediation, which breaks, for short moments, the omnipresent power of the given facts. Marcuse emphasizes the importance of memory as a means of resisting the dominance of the present reality. Remembering past events, especially those involving hope and resistance, allows individuals to dissociate themselves from the existing order and see it as something that can be changed. Memory provides a link to a different dimension of human experience, one that is not entirely shaped by the demands of the current system. By recalling the past, individuals can momentarily break free from the power of the present and imagine alternative possibilities for the future. Quote 58. The functional language is a radically anti-historical language. Operational rationality has little room and little use for historical reason. Marcuse argues that the functional language of advanced industrial society is fundamentally anti-historical. It reduces concepts to their immediate operational meaning, leaving no space for historical reflection or understanding. This anti-historical approach serves the interests of those in power by preventing people from recognizing the broader context of their situation, including the struggles and achievements of the past. By eliminating the historical dimension, functional language ensures that people are unable to see beyond the existing order and envision meaningful change. Quote 59. Recognition and relation to the past as present counteracts the functionalization of thought by and in the established reality. Marcuse asserts that connecting with the past in a meaningful way can counteract the functional, one-dimensional thinking promoted by the current system. When individuals understand history as something that is still relevant to their present circumstances, they can resist the tendency to see everything in purely operational terms. This recognition of the past allows for the development of concepts that go beyond the limitations of the present, offering a perspective that challenges the established order. By relating to the past as an active part of the present, individuals can maintain a critical consciousness that opposes the functionalization of thought. Quote 60. The closed language does not demonstrate and explain. It communicates decision, dictum, command. Marcuse describes the language of advanced industrial society as closed, meaning that it does not engage in explanation or critical reasoning. Instead, it functions as a means of communicating decisions and commands, leaving no room for debate or questioning. This type of language is authoritarian in nature, as it imposes its meaning without allowing for discussion or dissent. By presenting statements as unquestionable truths, closed language reinforces the power of those in authority and discourages individuals from engaging in critical thinking or seeking alternative perspectives. Quote 61. The general form was dissolved into statements identifying the particular operations and conditions from which the complaint was derived, and the complaint was taken care of by changing these particular operations and conditions. Marcuse explains how researchers investigating workers' complaints in an industrial setting transformed general, sweeping statements into specific operational issues that could be easily managed. For instance, instead of addressing a worker's general complaint that wages are too low, the researchers would reframe it as a specific personal problem, such as a financial hardship due to a spouse's medical expenses. This reframing reduced the general condition that might apply to many workers into a specific, isolated issue that could be fixed with an individualized solution. By narrowing broad grievances into individual situations, the researchers effectively eliminated the broader implications of the complaints, thus maintaining the existing power structure without addressing systemic issues. Quote 62. The concreteness of the particular case, which the translation achieves, is the result of a series of abstractions from its real concreteness, which is in the universal character of the case. Marcuse argues that when complaints are translated into individualized, specific statements, they lose their true, broader meaning. The original complaint, in its generality, connected the individual's issue to a larger, systemic problem affecting many people. By focusing on the particular details of each complaint, the universal aspect of the issue is abstracted away, reducing the potential for understanding the true, systemic nature of the problem. This abstraction process results in a distorted form of concreteness that ignores the collective experience of the working class, thereby preventing any meaningful change to the underlying issues. Quote 63. Once the personal discontent is isolated from the general unhappiness, once the universal concepts which militate against functionalization are dissolved into particular reference, the case becomes a treatable and tractable incident. Marcuse points out that the process of isolating personal discontent from broader social issues makes individual cases easier to manage and resolve within the existing system. By breaking down universal grievances into particular, individualized problems, these issues become manageable for those in power. This approach removes the potential for collective resistance and social change, as it fragments the shared experience of discontent. The result is a system in which problems are treated, but not truly solved, as the underlying systemic issues remain unchallenged and intact. Quote 64. The worker B, once his medical bills have been taken care of, will recognize that, generally speaking, wages are not too low, and that they were a hardship only in his individual situation. In this passage, Marcuse illustrates how individualizing a worker's complaint serves to neutralize any broader criticism of the wage system. Once the worker's immediate financial needs are addressed, he is likely to view his situation as a unique personal issue rather than part of a larger systemic problem. By framing his complaint in individualized terms, the broader issue of inadequate wages is obscured, and the worker's potential to identify as part of a collective struggle is diminished. This approach effectively reinforces the existing wage system, preventing workers from seeing their individual struggles as part of a shared experience that could lead to collective action for systemic change. Quote 65. The arrested experience is not his doing, and his function is not to think in terms of a critical theory, but to train supervisors in more human and effective methods of dealing with their workers. Marcuse acknowledges that the researchers and managers involved in translating workers' complaints are not necessarily acting out of malice. Their role is not to engage in critical analysis of the broader system, but to find practical solutions that will improve the efficiency of the workplace. Their focus is on training supervisors to use more human and effective methods to manage workers, but this approach ultimately serves to maintain the status quo. By addressing individual complaints in a way that avoids challenging the underlying structures of power, the researchers and managers contribute to a system that is both repressive and efficient, keeping workers content without addressing the root causes of their discontent. Quote 66. By virtue of its methodology, this empiricism is ideological. In order to illustrate its ideological character, let us look at a study of political activity in the United States. Marcuse argues that the methodological approach used in certain forms of empirical research is inherently ideological. By focusing on operational definitions and measurable facts, these studies fail to capture the broader context and deeper meanings of the phenomena they investigate. This narrow focus reinforces the existing social order by ignoring the systemic issues that underlie individual experiences. Marcuse illustrates this point with an example of a study on political activity, which defines democratic processes in terms that align with the existing political system, thereby legitimizing it without questioning its fundamental structure. This form of empiricism, by accepting the status quo as the norm, becomes an instrument of ideology, reinforcing the very system it claims to objectively analyze. Quote 67. The totalitarian universe of technological rationality is the latest transmutation of the idea of reason. Marcuse argues that the modern, technologically driven society represents the latest transformation of the concept of reason. What once was a tool for liberation and understanding has now evolved into a mechanism for domination and control. Technological rationality, with its emphasis on efficiency and productivity, has taken on a totalitarian character, shaping society in ways that suppress critical thought and reinforce conformity. The idea of reason, which originally sought to distinguish truth from falsehood and transform reality, has become instrumental in maintaining the existing social order, eliminating contradiction and reducing the potential for genuine freedom. Quote 68. The stabilizing tendencies conflict with the subversive elements of reason, the power of positive with that of negative thinking, until the achievements of advanced industrial civilization lead to the triumph of the one-dimensional reality over all contradiction. Marcuse explains that within Western thought, there has always been a tension between forces that seek to stabilize society and those that challenge it. Reason has both stabilizing and subversive aspects. It can affirm the status quo, but also reveal contradictions and imagine alternatives. In advanced industrial civilization, however, the stabilizing tendencies have triumphed, leading to a one-dimensional reality in which contradictions are eliminated or absorbed. This one-dimensionality stifles negative thinking, the ability to critique and envision alternatives, and ensures that the achievements of industrial civilization serve to maintain rather than transform the existing social structure. Quote 69. True discourse, logic, reveals and expresses that which really is, as distinguished from that which appears to be real. Marcuse describes the classical conception of reason, where logic and discourse are not merely concerned with describing the world as it appears, but aim to reveal deeper truths about reality. In this view, there is a fundamental distinction between appearance and true being. True discourse seeks to uncover the essence of things, going beyond superficial appearances to reveal what is truly real. This approach to reason implies a critical dimension, as it involves questioning and moving beyond the immediate, given reality to understand its underlying nature. Quote 70. Logos and eros are in themselves the unity of the positive and the negative, creation and destruction. In the exigencies of thought and in the madness of love is the destructive refusal of the established ways of life. Marcuse highlights the dual nature of logos, reason, and eros, desire, which embody both creation and destruction. In the realms of thought and love, there is an inherent refusal of established norms, a drive to break away from the given reality and strive for something higher. This refusal is both creative and destructive, as it challenges the existing order while seeking to establish a new one. The pursuit of truth and fulfillment requires a rejection of the established ways of life, which are seen as limiting and repressive. This dual nature of logos and eros is a powerful force for change, pushing against the constraints of the present reality. Quote 71. The classical proposition according to which truth is incompatible with enslavement by socially necessary labor is still valid. Marcuse argues that the classical idea that true freedom and truth cannot coexist with the enslavement imposed by socially necessary labor remains relevant even in modern society. As long as individuals are forced to spend their lives working to meet basic needs, they are unable to achieve true freedom or a genuine human existence. This condition prevents people from realizing their potential and limits their ability to engage in critical thought. The classical notion that freedom from toil is a prerequisite for truth underscores the continuing relevance of the struggle for a society in which individuals are liberated from the necessity of alienated labor. Quote 72. In the human reality, all existence that spends itself in procuring the prerequisites of existence is thus an untrue and unfree existence. Marcuse emphasizes that in human society, any existence focused solely on securing the necessities of life is inherently untrue and unfree. Such a life is characterized by limitation and denial of one's true potential, as individuals are unable to engage in activities that fulfill their essence as human beings. The pursuit of basic needs becomes an obstacle to achieving a higher form of existence, one that is characterized by freedom, creativity, and self-realization. This perspective underscores the need to transcend the conditions of material necessity in order to attain a truly human way of life. Quote 73. Here, the historical barrier arrests and distorts the quest for truth. The societal division of labor obtains the dignity of an ontological condition. Marcuse explains that the historical reality of societal division of labor has imposed a barrier that distorts the pursuit of truth. The division of labor, which confines certain groups to a life of toil, while granting others the freedom to pursue higher knowledge, becomes entrenched as though it were a fundamental, unchangeable aspect of existence. This societal structure prevents the realization of universal freedom and truth, as it restricts access to these higher pursuits to a privileged few. The historical conditions of labor thus take on the appearance of a natural, ontological state, masking their contingent and changeable nature. Quote 74. If these propositions are to be true, then the copula is states an ought, a desideratum. It judges conditions in which virtue is not knowledge, in which men do not perform the function for which their nature best suits them, in which they are not free, etc. Marcuse argues that certain propositions, like man is free or virtue is knowledge, imply an ideal state rather than a description of existing reality. The word is in these statements actually expresses an ought, suggesting that these conditions do not currently exist but should be realized. In other words, the statements contain an inherent contradiction between what is and what ought to be. They present an ideal that must be achieved, thus transforming these propositions into imperatives. This tension between is and ought is a critical feature of dialectical thought, which aims to transcend the existing conditions and push towards a better reality. Abstractness, quote 75, is the very life of thought, the token of its authenticity. But there are false and true abstractions. Marcuse asserts that abstraction is an essential aspect of genuine thought, as it allows us to move beyond the immediate, given reality, and consider the broader factors that shape it. However, he distinguishes between false and true abstractions. True abstractions remain connected to the historical and social context from which they emerge, enabling a critical perspective that can address the root causes of social issues. False abstractions, on the other hand, detach themselves from this context and fail to engage with the underlying dynamics of the established order. True thought, therefore, involves abstraction that remains grounded in the historical conditions and aims to transform them. Quote 76. Those who bore the brunt of the untrue reality, and who, therefore, seem to be most in need of attaining its subversion, were not the concern of philosophy. It abstracted from them and continued to abstract from them. Marcuse critiques traditional philosophy for ignoring the plight of those who suffer most under oppressive social conditions. While philosophical thought often claims to pursue truth and justice, it historically abstracted away from the experiences of the oppressed, focusing instead on ideals that were disconnected from the material reality of the majority. This tendency to ignore the lived experience of the marginalized meant that philosophy failed to challenge the social structures that perpetuated inequality and oppression. As a result, philosophical thought often remained complicit in maintaining the status quo rather than actively seeking its transformation. Quote 77. Defining its concepts in terms of potentialities which are of an essentially different order of thought and existence, the philosophic critique finds itself blocked by the reality from which it dissociates itself and proceeds to construct a realm of reason purged from empirical contingency. Marcuse explains that philosophical critique, in attempting to define concepts in terms of potentialities that transcend the existing reality, often becomes disconnected from the empirical world. This dissociation leads philosophy to construct an idealized realm of reason, removed from the contingencies of everyday life. By focusing on abstract ideals without addressing the concrete conditions that shape human existence, philosophy limits its ability to bring about real change. The result is a form of thought that remains detached from the very reality it seeks to critique, rendering its insights ineffective in transforming the material conditions of society. Quote 78. In contrast, dialectical thought is and remains unscientific to the extent to which it is such judgment, and the judgment is imposed upon dialectical thought by the nature of its object, by its objectivity. Marcuse argues that dialectical thought remains unscientific because it involves a judgment that goes beyond mere description of reality. This judgment is not arbitrary, but arises from the objective nature of the subject matter. Dialectical thought seeks to comprehend reality in its true concreteness, which includes its contradictions and potential for change. Unlike scientific thought, which often aims to describe and quantify, dialectical thought involves a critique that challenges the existing order and points towards its transformation. It does not simply accept reality as it is, but evaluates it in light of what it could be, thereby maintaining a critical and transformative perspective. Quote 79. The ontological tension between essence and appearance, between is and ought, becomes historical tension, and the inner negativity of the object world is understood as the work of the historical subject, man in his struggle with nature and society. Marcuse explains that the traditional philosophical distinction between essence and appearance, or between is and ought, becomes a historical tension when viewed through a dialectical lens. This tension reflects the contradictions within society that arise from human activity and struggle. The inner negativity of the world, the gap between what things are and what they could be, is the result of human history, shaped by the efforts of individuals and groups to change their conditions. Dialectical thought thus transforms abstract philosophical concepts into concrete historical dynamics, emphasizing that the potential for change lies within the ongoing struggle of humanity against oppressive structures. Quote 80. The domination of man by man is still the historical continuum that links pre-technological and technological reason. Marcuse argues that the domination of humans by other humans is a continuous thread connecting earlier forms of reason with the modern, technologically driven rationality. Even as technological advancements bring about changes in how society is structured, the core logic of domination remains intact. Technological society transforms personal dependence, such as that of the slave on the master, into a dependence on impersonal systems like economic laws or the market. This shift makes domination appear more objective and rational, yet it still perpetuates the same fundamental power dynamics that have always existed, merely in a new form. Quote 81. The limits of this rationality and its sinister force appear in the progressive enslavement of man by a productive apparatus which perpetuates the struggle for existence and extends it to a total international struggle which ruins the lives of those who build and use this apparatus. Marcuse critiques technological rationality, highlighting its inherent contradictions. Although it aims to improve productivity and distribute benefits widely, this rationality ultimately enslaves people within a system that perpetuates a struggle for survival. Instead of liberating individuals, the productive apparatus demands more labor, effort, and sacrifice, extending its reach globally, even to the point of international conflicts. The very tools and systems that people create to make life better end up dictating their lives, diminishing freedom rather than enhancing it. This ongoing struggle reveals the sinister aspect of technological progress that seems inescapable and counterproductive. Quote 82. The wrong organization of society demands further explanation in view of the situation of advanced industrial society, in which the integration of the formerly negative and transcending social forces with the established system seems to create a new social structure. Marcuse suggests that the current organization of society is fundamentally flawed, especially in the context of advanced industrial societies. The integration of forces that were once critical and opposed to the system into the established order has led to the emergence of a new social structure. These formerly negative or revolutionary elements have lost their transformative potential as they have been co-opted by the system. This integration makes it harder to recognize alternatives or envision changes, resulting in a society that appears stable but is actually built on a repressive and unsustainable foundation. Quote 83. Thought and behavior express a false consciousness, responding to and contributing to the preservation of a false order of facts. And this false consciousness has become embodied in the prevailing technical apparatus, which in turn reproduces it. Marcuse argues that the prevailing mode of thought and behavior in advanced industrial society reflects a false consciousness, an acceptance of the current order as natural and unchangeable. This false consciousness is embedded in the technical systems and apparatus that dominate everyday life, creating a feedback loop that continually reinforces it. The technical apparatus not only serves the needs of production, but also shapes how people think and act, ensuring that they conform to the demands of the system. By reproducing this false consciousness, the technical apparatus becomes a powerful tool for maintaining the status quo and preventing any meaningful critique or change. Quote 84. The negative is in the positive, the inhuman in the humanization, enslavement in liberation. Marcuse points out the inherent contradictions within the logic of technological progress. What is presented as positive, such as humanization and liberation, often contains negative elements like inhumanity and enslavement. The very processes that claim to liberate individuals from toil, from nature, or from necessity often introduce new forms of control and dependency. The promise of technological progress and increased productivity masks a deeper reality where individuals are increasingly subordinated to the systems they have created. This contradiction reveals the complexity of progress, where the apparent benefits often conceal underlying forms of repression and control. Quote 85. The quantification of nature, which led to its explication in terms of mathematical structures, separated reality from all inherent ends, and, consequently, separated the true from the good, science from ethics. Marcuse explains how the scientific approach that quantifies nature and describes it in mathematical terms has led to a fundamental separation between reality and meaning. By focusing solely on measurable aspects, science has stripped nature of any inherent purpose or value. This shift also created a divide between what is true and what is good, effectively separating scientific inquiry from ethical considerations. The rationality that emerges from this separation views the world as devoid of intrinsic meaning, treating it merely as material to be used and controlled. This perspective underpins the modern technological worldview, where efficiency and control take precedence over questions of morality or purpose. Quote 86. Scientific technical rationality and manipulation are welded together into new forms of social control. Marcuse argues that scientific and technical rationality, initially seen as tools for understanding and improving the world, have become instruments of manipulation and social control. The rational organization of society, driven by scientific management and technological advancements, has led to increased productivity, but also to new ways of controlling human behavior. These new forms of control are embedded within the technical systems themselves, shaping not only what people do, but also how they think and understand their world. The result is a society where rationality serves not to liberate individuals, but to ensure their conformity to the demands of the system, reinforcing existing power structures. Quote 87. By virtue of the rationalization of the modes of labor, the elimination of qualities is transferred from the universe of science to that of daily experience. Marcuse argues that the rationalization inherent in modern scientific thinking has also permeated everyday life, transforming how people experience the world. The process of reducing things to quantifiable units, initially used in scientific analysis, has now become the basis for organizing labor and daily life. This quantification strips away the unique qualitative aspects of human experience, reducing people to mere units of labor power calculable in terms of time. This shift reflects the broader instrumentalization of human existence, where everything is evaluated based on efficiency and productivity, erasing individual characteristics and deeper human qualities. Quote 88. The scientific method, which led to the ever more effective domination of nature, thus came to provide the pure concepts as well as the instrumentalities for the ever more effective domination of man by man through the domination of nature. Marcuse explains that the scientific method, which initially served to better understand and control nature, has also become a tool for controlling humans. As the domination of nature became more efficient, the principles and tools of this process were applied to human relations, enabling the domination of man by man. The rationality of science, which was supposed to serve human progress, instead becomes intertwined with social control, reinforcing hierarchical power structures. This merger between the control of nature and social domination highlights the problematic nature of technological rationality, which appears neutral but actually serves to perpetuate power imbalances. Quote 89. Technology also provides the great rationalization of the unfreedom of man and demonstrates the technical impossibility of being autonomous, of determining one's own life. Marcuse argues that technology, while often seen as a liberating force, actually reinforces human unfreedom by making autonomy seem technically impossible. The technical systems that shape modern life present themselves as unavoidable and necessary, making individual autonomy appear impractical or unrealistic. People are led to believe that their dependence on technological systems is natural and inevitable, which rationalizes their lack of freedom. Instead of enabling people to determine their own lives, technology becomes a mechanism for justifying their submission to the demands of the system, thus maintaining existing structures of domination. Quote 90. The liberating force of technology, the instrumentalization of things, turns into a fetter of liberation, the instrumentalization of man. Marcuse points out the inherent contradiction in the role of technology. While it has the potential to liberate individuals by turning the natural world into instruments for human use, it also ends up instrumentalizing people themselves. Instead of freeing humans, technology becomes a means to control them, as people are integrated into the technological apparatus as mere cogs. The promise of technological liberation is thus betrayed by its actual function, which is to incorporate human beings into a system that limits their autonomy and enforces conformity, turning a potentially liberating force into a mechanism of control. Quote 91. In the construction of the technological reality, there is no such thing as a purely rational scientific order. The process of technological rationality is a political process. Marcuse argues that technological rationality, often perceived as purely objective and neutral, is inherently political. The development and application of scientific knowledge are not free from societal influences, but are shaped by the needs and interests of those in power. The supposed neutrality of technology masks the fact that it serves specific political purposes, such as maintaining control over people and reinforcing existing hierarchies. In this way, technological rationality is not just about efficiency and productivity, but is deeply tied to power dynamics and social control, making it impossible to separate science from its political context. Quote 92. The web of domination has become the web of reason itself, and this society is fatally entangled in it. Marcuse suggests that the logic of domination has become so deeply intertwined with the concept of reason that it is now impossible to separate the two. The very principles of rationality that guide modern society are themselves shaped by the need to dominate and control. As a result, society is trapped within a system where rational thought perpetuates rather than challenges domination. This entanglement makes it difficult to envision a different kind of rationality that could lead to true freedom, as the existing system of thought reinforces the structures of power that keep people unfree. Quote 93. The redefinition of thought, which helps to coordinate mental operations with those in the social reality, aims at a therapy. Thought is on the level with reality, when it is cured from transgression beyond a conceptual framework which is either purely axiomatic, logic, mathematics, or coextensive with the established universe of discourse and behavior. Marcuse argues that the redefinition of thought in modern philosophy aims to bring thinking in line with the social reality, treating it as a kind of therapy. This approach limits thought to what can be directly experienced or logically proven, excluding any ideas that go beyond the established conceptual framework. By doing so, this kind of philosophy attempts to cure thought of its ability to transcend and question the given reality. Thought is reduced to either purely logical or mathematical reasoning or to reflecting the established norms of discourse and behavior, thereby eliminating any critical or transformative potential. This redefinition of thought thus serves to maintain the status quo by preventing any radical questioning of the existing order. Quote 94. The empiricism of linguistic analysis moves within a framework which does not allow such contradiction. The self-imposed restriction to the prevalent behavioral universe makes for an intrinsically positive attitude. Marcuse critiques the empiricism of linguistic analysis for its intrinsic limitation to the established universe of discourse. By confining itself to analyzing the language of everyday behavior, linguistic analysis inherently adopts a positive stance towards the status quo. It lacks the capacity to question or contradict the established norms and values, as it only examines and clarifies the meanings of words within their existing social context. This restriction prevents linguistic analysis from addressing deeper issues related to power, domination, or systemic injustice, thus making it a fundamentally conservative approach that aligns itself with the existing social order. Quote 95. The universe of discourse and behavior which begins to speak in Saint-Simon's positivism is that of technological reality. In it, the object world is being transformed into an instrumentality. Marcuse points out that the universe of discourse emerging from positivism, as first articulated by Saint-Simon, is rooted in technological reality. In this framework, the natural and social world is increasingly seen as a set of tools or means to achieve specific ends. The object world, everything that exists, is reduced to its usefulness or functionality, stripping it of any inherent value beyond its instrumental purpose. This perspective reflects the growing dominance of technological rationality, where efficiency, productivity, and control become the primary measures of value. Such an approach not only transforms the way people relate to the world, but also reinforces a one-dimensional view of reality that ignores deeper ethical or existential considerations. Quote 96. Reason repels transcendence. At the later stage in contemporary positivism, it is no longer scientific and technical progress which motivates the repulsion. However, the contraction of thought is no less severe because it is self-imposed, philosophy's own method. Marcuse argues that in contemporary positivism, reason actively rejects any form of transcendence, meaning it refuses to consider anything beyond the immediate empirical reality. Unlike earlier stages, where the rejection of transcendence was motivated by the pursuit of scientific and technical progress, this later stage is characterized by a self-imposed limitation. Philosophers themselves impose these constraints, narrowing the scope of thought and avoiding questions that challenge the established reality. This contraction of thought serves to maintain the status quo by excluding critical or transformative perspectives, thus making philosophy complicit in reinforcing existing structures of power and control. Quote 97. The language which provides most of the material for the analysis is a purged language, purged not only of its unorthodox vocabulary, but also of the means for expressing any other contents than those furnished to the individuals by their society. Marcuse critiques the language used in linguistic analysis, describing it as purged of any elements that might challenge the established social order. This language is stripped of any unconventional or radical vocabulary, leaving only what is deemed acceptable by the prevailing norms. As a result, it lacks the capacity to express ideas or perspectives that go beyond what society has already provided. This purging of language limits the ability to think critically or to imagine alternative ways of being, effectively reinforcing the status quo by ensuring that only certain types of discourse are possible. Quote 98. The almost masochistic reduction of speech to the humble and common is made into a program. If the words language, experience, world have a use, it must be as humble a one as that of the words table, lamp, door. Marcuse argues that linguistic analysis reduces philosophical inquiry to the examination of the most mundane aspects of language. This approach, which treats complex concepts like language, experience, and world as no different from ordinary objects like table or lamp, reflects a deliberate attempt to limit the scope of thought. By focusing only on what is humble and common, linguistic analysis dismisses the possibility of exploring deeper, more abstract questions about human existence. This reductionist approach effectively strips philosophy of its critical and transformative potential, confining it to the analysis of trivialities while ignoring the broader questions that could challenge the existing social order. Quote 99. The transformation of critical into positive thinking takes place mainly in the therapeutic treatment of universal concepts. Their translation into operational and behavioral terms parallels closely the sociological translation discussed above. Marcuse argues that the shift from critical to positive thinking occurs primarily through the therapeutic approach to universal concepts, reducing them to operational and behavioral terms. This transformation mirrors the sociological approach that focuses on improving efficiency and behavior within existing frameworks, rather than questioning or challenging those frameworks. By translating complex, abstract concepts into terms that fit neatly within the established social order, this approach strips them of their critical potential. Instead of serving as tools for questioning and transforming society, these concepts are redefined to support and legitimize the status quo, effectively turning critical thinking into an instrument of social conformity. Quote 100. The repressive conditions in which men think and live, thought, any mode of thinking which is not confined to pragmatic orientation within the status quo, can recognize the facts and respond to the facts only by going behind them. Marcuse argues that under repressive conditions, true thought cannot merely accept the surface reality presented by the existing order. Instead, genuine thinking must delve beyond appearances and examine the underlying forces shaping that reality. In a society that restricts critical thought only by going behind the immediate, pragmatic facts, can one recognize the deeper truths that are otherwise concealed. This approach is necessary to reveal the power dynamics and structures of domination that are obscured by the status quo, which prefers thought to be confined within its established boundaries. Quote 101. The separation of science from philosophy is itself a historical event. Aristotelian physics was a part of philosophy and, as such, preparatory to the first science, ontology. Marcuse points out that the separation of science from philosophy was not an inevitable or natural development, but a historical event. In the time of Aristotle, physics was considered part of philosophy, and it served as a precursor to ontology, the study of being. This unified approach to understanding the world connected scientific inquiry with broader philosophical questions about existence. The modern separation of science from philosophy has led to a narrowing of both disciplines, with science becoming more specialized and empirical, while philosophy is left to address abstract questions disconnected from the material world. This historical shift has implications for how we understand and relate to both science and philosophy today. Quote 102. The philosophic universe thus continues to contain ghosts, fictions, and illusions, which may be more rational than their denial, insomuch as they are concepts that recognize the limits and the deceptions of the prevailing rationality. Marcuse argues that philosophy continues to engage with concepts that are often dismissed by positivist thinking as mere ghosts or illusions. These concepts, however, can be more rational than their rejection because they acknowledge the limitations and distortions inherent in the dominant forms of rationality. By addressing ideas that transcend immediate empirical facts, philosophy reveals the inadequacies of the prevailing rational order and opens the possibility for understanding deeper truths. The rejection of such concepts by positivist approaches limits our ability to critically assess and transform the existing social and intellectual order. Quote 103. The rational rather than the irrational becomes the most effective vehicle of mystification. Marcuse suggests that in advanced industrial societies, rationality itself becomes a tool for mystification. Unlike earlier forms of ideology that relied on irrational myths or superstitions to maintain control, modern societies use rational, scientific, and technical discourses to obscure the underlying contradictions and injustices of the system. The rational organization of society, including the technical calculations of efficiency and productivity, serves to legitimize the status quo while concealing the power structures that perpetuate domination. In this way, rationality is used to create an illusion of progress and justice, masking the true nature of social relations and preventing critical examination. Quote 104. The trouble is that the statistics, measurements, and field studies of empirical sociology and political science are not rational enough. They become mystifying to the extent to which they are isolated from the truly concrete context which makes the facts and determines their function. Marcuse argues that the empirical methods used in sociology and political science, such as statistics and field studies, often fail to capture the true meaning of social facts because they are disconnected from the broader context that gives those facts significance. By focusing on isolated data points without considering the larger social structures that shape them, these methods can become tools of mystification rather than enlightenment. The empirical findings may be accurate in their own limited context, but they do not provide a true understanding of the social forces at play, thereby perpetuating a superficial view of reality that obscures the deeper dynamics of power and control. Quote 105. Multidimensional language is made into one-dimensional language, in which different and conflicting meanings no longer interpenetrate, but are kept apart. The explosive historical dimension of meaning is silenced. Marcuse criticizes linguistic analysis for reducing the complexity of language to a one-dimensional form. In this process, the richness of language, which allows for multiple and sometimes conflicting meanings to coexist, is lost. By isolating meanings and stripping them of their historical context, linguistic analysis eliminates the potential for language to reveal deeper truths about society. The explosive historical dimension of language, its ability to express and critique the social conditions that shape it, is silenced, turning language into a tool that merely reinforces the existing social order rather than challenging it. This reduction of language limits the potential for critical thought and transformative action. Quote 106. The real universe of ordinary language is that of the struggle for existence. It is indeed an ambiguous, vague, obscure universe, and is certainly in need of clarification. Marcuse argues that the everyday language people use reflects the complexities and contradictions of their lived experience, which is often characterized by a struggle for survival. This real universe of language is inherently ambiguous and obscure, shaped by the tensions and conflicts of social life. While linguistic analysis seeks to clarify this language, it often fails to address the underlying social realities that give rise to its ambiguities. True philosophical analysis should go beyond simply clarifying language and should seek to understand the deeper social conditions that shape how people speak and think. Only by engaging with these underlying conditions can philosophy hope to achieve genuine clarity and insight. Quote 107. The commitment of analytic philosophy to the mutilated reality of thought and speech shows forth strikingly in its treatment of universals. Marcuse argues that analytic philosophy is committed to a narrow, mutilated version of reality, which becomes evident in its treatment of universals, concepts like mind, will, or good that transcend particular instances. Instead of acknowledging the richness and complexity inherent in these universals, analytic philosophy seeks to reduce them to particular behaviors, operations, or dispositions. This reduction strips universals of their deeper meanings, leaving only simplified versions that fit within the limits of observable actions. In doing so, analytic philosophy denies the full significance of these concepts and fails to address the broader social and historical contexts that shape human experience. Quote 108, "The mystifying character adheres not to the concepts of mind, self, consciousness, etc., but rather to their behavioral translation." Marcuse argues that it is not the concepts of mind, self, or consciousness that are inherently mystifying, but rather their reduction to mere behavioral terms that introduces a kind of mystification. By translating these concepts into observable behaviors, analytic philosophy fails to capture their true essence and significance. This reductionist approach treats complex, subjective experiences as if they were fully explainable through simple actions or dispositions, thus missing the depth and richness of the human condition. The true mystification lies in this oversimplification, which obscures the broader social and psychological factors that give these concepts their full meaning. Quote 109, "The way in which such things and people are organized, integrated, and administered operates as an entity different from its component parts, to such an extent that it can dispose of life and death, as in the case of the nation and the Constitution." Marcuse explains that institutions like the nation or the university are more than just the sum of their parts. The way these entities are organized gives them a power that transcends the individuals within them, allowing them to act as unified entities capable of profound influence, even deciding matters of life and death. This organizational structure gives institutions an independent existence that affects individuals in significant ways, making statements about the nation or the university meaningful in a way that cannot be reduced to descriptions of the people or buildings that comprise them. This independent power reflects the social structures that give rise to these entities, making them real forces in the lives of individuals. Quote 110, "The disharmony between the individual and the social needs, and the lack of representative institutions in which the individuals work for themselves and speak for themselves, lead to the reality of such universals as the nation, the party, the Constitution, the corporation, the church, a reality which is not identical with any particular identifiable entity." Marcuse argues that the existence of institutions like the nation, the party, or the corporation reflects a fundamental disharmony between individual needs and social organization. Because individuals lack meaningful representation and control over these institutions, these entities take on a life of their own, separate from the individuals they are supposed to serve. The reality of these universals is thus a reflection of the power structures that dominate society rather than a direct expression of the people within them. This separation between individual and social needs results in institutions that operate independently of the individuals they affect, creating a form of power that is abstract, yet real, and often repressive. Quote 111, "The substantive universal not only abstracts from concrete entity, it also denotes a different entity. The mind is more and other than conscious acts and behavior." Marcuse argues that substantive universals, such as mind, are not simply abstract representations of particular behaviors, but denote something fundamentally different and more comprehensive. The mind, for example, is not just the sum of conscious acts or behaviors, but a synthesizing force that gives coherence and meaning to these actions. This understanding of universals goes beyond the reductionist view that limits them to observable phenomena, recognizing that they capture an underlying quality or essence that is not reducible to individual actions or experiences. This broader perspective allows for a deeper understanding of the human condition, acknowledging the complexities and potentialities that cannot be fully captured by analyzing isolated behaviors. Quote 112, "The persistence of these untranslatable universals as nodal points of thought reflects the unhappy consciousness of a divided world in which that which is falls short of, and even denies that which can be. Marcuse argues that the continued presence of untranslatable universals, such as beauty or justice, reflects a deeper dissatisfaction with the existing state of the world. These universals represent ideals that point to possibilities beyond what currently exists. The gap between that which is and that which can be highlights the limitations and shortcomings of the present reality, revealing a sense of unfulfilled potential. This unhappy consciousness is an awareness of the tension between what is and what could be, and it drives the need for a deeper understanding that transcends the immediate given conditions. The persistence of these universals serves as a reminder of the potential for transformation and the need to challenge the status quo. Quote 113. The concept somehow expresses the difference and tension between potentiality and actuality, identity in this difference. It appears in the relation between the qualities, white, hard, but also beautiful, free, just, and the corresponding concepts, whiteness, hardness, beauty, freedom, justice. Marcuse explains that concepts such as beauty, freedom, or justice embody a tension between potentiality and actuality. These concepts are not simply descriptions of particular qualities, but represent the ideal form of those qualities. For example, beauty is not just the characteristic of a beautiful object, but an ideal that transcends any particular instance of beauty. This tension between the actual and the potential is what gives these concepts their power. They point to something beyond the immediate concrete reality, suggesting a higher form of existence that is yet to be realized. This distinction allows us to see the world not only as it is, but as it could be, and it drives the critical examination of the existing conditions in light of their unrealized potential. Quote 114. The universal concept denotes that which the particular entity is and is not. The translation can eliminate the hidden negation by reformulating the meaning in a non-contradictory proposition, but the untranslated statement suggests a real want. Marcuse explains that universal concepts such as beauty or freedom represent more than just their particular manifestations. The universal concept denotes both what the particular entity is and what it fails to be, indicating an inherent contradiction. While translating these universals into specific, non-contradictory terms may remove the sense of what is lacking, the original untranslated statement retains this hidden negation. This hidden negation reveals a genuine desire or need, as the universal contains an aspirational element that surpasses the qualities found in any particular instance. Thus, universals are imbued with a sense of something yet to be achieved, pointing beyond the current reality to an ideal that remains unfulfilled. Quote 115. The concept of beauty comprehends all the beauty not yet realized. The concept of freedom, all the liberty not yet attained. Marcuse argues that universal concepts like beauty and freedom are inherently aspirational, encompassing not only what has already been realized, but also what remains possible. These concepts transcend their particular instances, pointing towards an ideal state that has not yet been fully achieved. Beauty includes all that is beautiful, but also all potential forms of beauty that have yet to be manifested. Similarly, freedom is not limited to the liberties that currently exist, but also includes all the ways in which people might one day be truly free. These universals are thus not static definitions, but dynamic concepts that encompass both what is and what could be, urging us to strive towards realizing their fullest potential. Quote 116. The philosophic concepts are formed and developed in the consciousness of a general condition in a historical continuum. They are elaborated from an individual position within a specific society. Marcuse highlights the historical and social context of philosophical concepts. These concepts are not formed in isolation, but are shaped by the broader conditions of the society in which they are developed. Philosophy emerges from the lived experience of individuals within a specific historical period, reflecting the general conditions of that time. The universals and abstractions of philosophy are thus rooted in the concrete historical experiences of individuals, and the collective. This historical grounding gives philosophical concepts their relevance and meaning, as they reflect the conditions, struggles, and aspirations of society as a whole. Quote 117. The quest for criteria for judging between different philosophic projects thus leads to the quest for criteria for judging between different historical projects and alternatives, between different actual and possible ways of understanding and changing man and nature. Marcuse argues that evaluating philosophical projects requires us to evaluate the historical contexts and alternatives from which they emerge. Since philosophical concepts are shaped by historical conditions, judging between different philosophies is also a matter of judging between different historical possibilities. This means assessing the different ways in which societies have understood and transformed themselves, and determining which of these transformations represents a more rational and liberating direction for humanity. Philosophy is therefore not detached from historical action. Instead, it must be understood as part of a broader effort to understand and change human society. Quote 118. The transcendent project must be in accordance with the real possibilities open at the attained level of the material and intellectual culture. Marcuse argues that for a transformative historical project to be valid, it must be aligned with the real possibilities available at a given stage of cultural and material development. This means that the envisioned transformation should be grounded in the actual capabilities of society, based on the level of technology, knowledge, and social organization that has been achieved. A utopian vision must still be realistic in the sense that it builds upon the material and intellectual resources available, rather than imagining changes that are entirely disconnected from the current stage of human progress. This grounding in real possibilities ensures that the transformative project is not merely a fantasy, but a feasible path forward. Quote 119. The greater force of destruction, the greater productivity without destruction. In other words, the higher historical truth would pertain to the system which offers the greater chance of pacification. Marcuse suggests that the historical truth of different social systems can be judged by their capacity either for destruction or for productive development without violence. In the struggle between competing systems, capitalism and communism in his context, the one that offers a greater potential for peaceful, productive growth holds a higher historical truth. This notion of higher truth is connected to the potential for achieving a more humane and rational society where human needs can be met without the need for violence and domination. The true progress of a society, therefore, lies in its ability to foster development that minimizes destruction and maximizes human flourishing. Quote 120. Positive thinking and its neo-positivist philosophy counteract the historical content of rationality. This content is never an extraneous factor or meaning which can or cannot be included in the analysis. It enters into conceptual thought as constitutive factor and determines the validity of its concepts. Marcuse argues that positive thinking and neo-positivist philosophy undermine the historical content of rationality, which is essential for understanding concepts in their full context. Rationality is not just about logical or technical precision. It also has a historical dimension that shapes and validates concepts. When positive thinking ignores this historical content, it strips concepts of their critical potential, leaving them as empty tools that merely reinforce the status quo. The historical content of rationality introduces elements of critique, contradiction, and the potential for transcendence, which are necessary for questioning and transforming the existing social order. By ignoring these aspects, neo-positivist philosophy supports a one-dimensional view of reality that is incapable of fostering real change. Quote 121. The absorption of the negative by the positive is validated in the daily experience, which obfuscates the distinction between rational appearance and irrational reality. Marcuse argues that in advanced technological society, negative aspects of reality are absorbed into positive thinking, creating an illusion of harmony that obscures the true irrationality of the system. This process occurs in everyday life, where people experience both the benefits and the drawbacks of technology, but tend to accept the negative as an inevitable part of the positive. This absorption leads to a blurring of the line between what seems rational and what is actually irrational, making it difficult for individuals to perceive the contradictions inherent in the system. By presenting everything in a positive light, society prevents people from critically questioning the established order and recognizing the need for change. Quote 122. Critical thought strives to define the irrational character of the established rationality, which becomes increasingly obvious, and to define the tendencies which cause this rationality to generate its own transformation. Marcuse argues that true critical thought must expose the irrational aspects of the existing system, even though the system presents itself as rational. The contradictions within the established rationality, such as the coexistence of technological progress and widespread social inequality, reveal the irrationality of the system. Critical thought must also identify the forces within the system that have the potential to drive transformation. These forces are rooted in the technological capabilities and social conditions that, if redirected, could lead to a more rational and equitable society. By understanding these contradictions and possibilities, critical thought can help guide society toward a transformative path that overcomes the limitations of the current system. Quote 123. The new direction of technical progress would be the catastrophe of the established direction, not merely the quantitative evolution of the prevailing scientific and technological rationality, but rather its catastrophic transformation, the emergence of a new idea of reason, theoretical and practical. Marcuse argues that a genuine transformation of society would require a fundamental shift in the direction of technological progress. This change would not be a gradual improvement or continuation of the existing trajectory, but a radical break from it, a catastrophic transformation. Such a shift would involve the emergence of a new concept of reason that integrates both theoretical and practical aspects, aiming not merely at efficiency and control, but at the fulfillment of human needs and the creation of a more humane society. This new direction would redefine the purpose of technology, using it to enhance human freedom and well-being rather than perpetuate domination and inequality. Quote 124. Reason, in its application to society, has thus far been opposed to art, while art was granted the privilege of being rather irrational, not subject to scientific, technological, and operational reason. Marcuse argues that, historically, reason has been applied to society in a way that separates it from art, treating art as something irrational and outside the realm of scientific and technological reasoning. This separation has limited the transformative potential of both reason and art, as the rationality applied to social organization has been focused on control and domination, while art has been relegated to a secondary, non-rational role. By keeping reason and art apart, society has prevented the development of a more comprehensive understanding that could integrate the creativity and imagination of art with the practical organizational capabilities of reason. Such an integration would allow for a more liberating application of reason to social life, one that values human creativity and the pursuit of a richer, more meaningful existence. Quote 125. The scientific transformation of the world contain its own metaphysical transcendence. Marcuse suggests that the process of scientific transformation carries within it the potential for a metaphysical transcendence. As scientific rationality transforms the material conditions of the world, it also opens up new possibilities for how humans understand and relate to existence. This potential transcendence lies in the ability of science to move beyond the purely technical and instrumental, and to address deeper questions about the nature of human life and the pursuit of a good society. In this sense, the transformation brought about by science could ultimately lead to a redefinition of human values and purposes, transcending the limitations of the current order and creating a new vision of what it means to live a fulfilled and meaningful life. Quote 126. The qualitative change rather lies in the reconstruction of this base, that is, in its development, with a view of different ends. Marcuse argues that the qualitative change needed for true societal transformation is not just about advancing technology, but about reconstructing the technological base itself with new purposes in mind. Instead of using technology to perpetuate existing power structures and consumerist values, society should develop technology with the aim of enhancing human freedom, reducing unnecessary labor, and promoting well-being. This shift in the direction of technological development would require a rethinking of the goals that guide technological progress, moving away from profit and control towards the fulfillment of human potential and the creation of a more equitable and sustainable society. Quote 127. The historical achievement of science and technology has rendered possible the translation of values into technical tasks, the materialization of values. Marcuse argues that the progress of science and technology has made it possible to translate abstract values, such as freedom and justice, into concrete technical tasks. This means that the realization of these values is no longer merely a matter of philosophical speculation or moral aspiration, but can be achieved through the practical application of technological advancements. By redefining values as technical goals, society can use technology to create the conditions for human flourishing and freedom. This materialization of values represents a significant shift, as it allows for the integration of ethical and technical considerations in the development of a more just and liberated society. Quote 128. At the present stage, he is perhaps more powerless over his own apparatus than he ever was before. Marcuse argues that, despite the advancements in technology, individuals have become increasingly powerless over the very systems and technologies they have created. Technology, which was supposed to be a tool for human empowerment and liberation, now exerts control over people. This powerlessness is not alleviated by transferring control of technology from one group to another, such as from private corporations to the state. Instead, the dependence on technological systems continues, making people subject to the structures they themselves have built. This condition reflects a deeper crisis, where technological advancement has not led to greater freedom, but to an enhanced dependence on apparatuses beyond individual control. Passive quote 129. Pacification of existence does not suggest an accumulation of power, but rather the opposite. Peace and power, freedom and power, eros and power may well be contraries. Marcuse challenges the traditional association of power with progress, arguing that true peace and freedom may require a reduction rather than an accumulation of power. The concept of pacification of existence implies creating conditions where conflict, domination, and control are minimized. This state of peace is fundamentally at odds with the accumulation of power, which often involves coercion and control. Similarly, eros, the force of life and creativity, is incompatible with power when power is understood as domination. Marcuse suggests that a liberated society must reimagine its relationship to power, prioritizing peaceful coexistence, freedom, and creativity over the pursuit of control and dominance. Quote 130. There are two kinds of mastery, a repressive and a liberating one. The latter involves the reduction of misery, violence, and cruelty. Marcuse distinguishes between two forms of mastery over nature and society: repressive and liberating. Repressive mastery is characterized by domination, control, and exploitation, leading to suffering and the perpetuation of violence. In contrast, liberating mastery seeks to reduce misery and promote well-being by transforming the natural and social world in ways that alleviate suffering and foster freedom. This type of mastery does not seek to dominate, but rather to harmonize human activity with the needs of nature and society, aiming for a more humane and peaceful existence. The liberating mastery represents the potential for a more rational relationship with nature, one that transcends mere exploitation and contributes to human flourishing. Quote 131. History is the negation of nature. What is only natural is overcome and recreated by the power of reason. Marcuse argues that human history is defined by the effort to transcend and transform the purely natural world through the application of reason. Nature, in its raw state, is marked by blind forces, scarcity, and suffering. Through history, humans use reason to overcome these natural limitations, reshaping the environment to better meet their needs and aspirations. This process of transformation is a fundamental aspect of human development, as it allows people to create a world that reflects their values and ideals, rather than being subject to the arbitrary forces of nature. The negation of nature through reason is thus a key feature of historical progress, enabling the possibility of a more rational and just society. Quote 132. Civilization produces the means for freeing nature from its own brutality, its own insufficiency, its own blindness, by virtue of the cognitive and transforming power of reason. Marcuse suggests that civilization, through its development of science and technology, has the potential to liberate nature from its inherent brutality and limitations. Nature, left to its own devices, is marked by chaos, violence, and suffering. However, through the application of reason and technological advancement, humanity has the power to transform nature, reducing its destructive aspects and creating conditions for a more harmonious existence. This process involves not only conquering the natural world, but also reshaping it in ways that promote peace, well-being, and freedom. The ultimate goal of this transformation is to create a world where both humans and nature can coexist in a state of mutual benefit, free from the suffering that characterizes the natural state. Quote 133. Art would become a technique for destroying this business and this misery. Marcuse envisions a new role for art, one that goes beyond its traditional function as a form of aesthetic expression or a tool for beautifying the existing social order. Instead, he argues that art could become a means of challenging and dismantling the structures of exploitation and misery that characterize modern society. By using its capacity to imagine alternative realities, art could help to reveal the contradictions and injustices of the established system, inspiring people to envision and work towards a different kind of world. In this sense, art would not merely reflect reality, but actively participate in transforming it, becoming a tool for social and political liberation. Quote 134. Comfort, business, and job security in a society which prepares itself for and against nuclear destruction may serve as a universal example of enslaving contentment. Marcuse criticizes the kind of contentment that people find in comfort, business, and job security in a society that is simultaneously preparing for the possibility of nuclear annihilation. This enslaving contentment refers to the way in which individuals are lulled into complacency by the material comforts and stability provided by the system, even as that same system perpetuates the risk of catastrophic destruction. The comforts of modern life, instead of being a sign of true freedom, serve to obscure the dangers and irrationalities of the prevailing social order. People become content with their immediate circumstances, ignoring the broader existential threats that the system itself creates, thus remaining complicit in their own, quote 135, subjugation. The non-functioning of television and the allied media might thus begin to achieve what the inherent contradictions of capitalism did not achieve: the disintegration of the system. Marcuse provocatively suggests that if the mass media, particularly television and other entertainment channels, were to stop functioning, it might have a significant impact on the stability of the capitalist system. The mass media play a crucial role in maintaining the status quo by promoting consumerism, distracting the public, and shaping consciousness in ways that support the existing order. If these media were suddenly absent, people would be forced to confront their own reality without the comforting distractions that keep them passive. This interruption might lead to a crisis of consciousness, where individuals begin to question the system and its contradictions, potentially sparking the kind of social change that the internal contradictions of capitalism have so far failed to produce. One-Dimensional Man, by Herbert Marcuse, concludes by stressing that the advanced industrial society has successfully merged freedom with the forces of domination, making it challenging to envision or achieve true liberation. Marcuse highlights that the potential for meaningful change lies in awakening a new sensibility that can challenge the prevailing one-dimensionality, recognizing the difference between false needs imposed by the system and true needs that foster genuine freedom. He leaves the reader with the hope that through a transformation of consciousness and a renewed effort to realize untapped potentialities, society might move beyond the technological apparatus that enforces uniformity and into a realm where human creativity and individuality can thrive.
Curious to dive into the mind of Herbert Marcuse? With StudyLab Pro's book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of One-Dimensional Man in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.